Dan, I thought what we can do now is try to get some sense about what you think this roster is going to look like and what it means that you think it's going to look a certain way.
Yeah, Dan, this is one of those years where I don't think that there's going to be a lot of drama on Cuts Day. The roster just isn't constructed in a way where there's going to be a name that makes you jump out of your chair and run for your phone and text everybody you know that somebody got let go. But I think it is a roster that obviously has been in flux since the day that Ryan Poles got here, and now he's got his chance to mold his initial 53 with the understanding that obviously what they set at 3:00 Tuesday probably won't be exactly what it looks like when we get to 3:00 the following Wednesday and they're starting their prep for 49ers week.
Dan, how much help do you think there is specifically for the offensive line in other teams' cuts, or do they feel comfortable with the 5 or 6 that they think they have?
Well, two answers to that question. I don't think there's ever a lot of offensive line help that gets out the door at this stage in August, right? The teams are trying to create depth. They're trying to create comfort within their own buildings, and it's very rare that you get somebody that's starter quality that suddenly shows up on your doorstep on the eve of week one. I think they have to figure out where their comfort level is with this group right now. And that's the first 5. And then obviously it's the 4 or 5 that you want to put behind them on the initial 53. And I think, there may be some intrigue. If there's any intrigue at all in the next 48 hours, next 36 hours, whatever it is, it's what are they doing with Riley Reif? What are they doing with Michael Schofield? Guys that were obviously brought in right before training camp began, but have not necessarily seized roles that we thought they might have. And so now it's kind of, do they have a place on this team? Are they backups? Are they going to be around at all? Well, that's going to be one to keep an eye on as these moves get made.
When I watch games, something that I try to do, especially some of these preseason games, is I try to take narrative out of it and just say if there are no numbers, no names, and I'm just watching that guy, what do I think? And Teven Jenkins was good, and he plays nasty. There's an element to, all right, I'm going to hit this guy and I'm going to keep hitting things until the whistle blows and I have to stop hitting things. And he moves well. If I didn't know who that was or what was going on, I would say, hey, that right guard looks competent.
So what you heard about Teven Jenkins coming out in the pre-draft process was that he plays nasty when he feels nasty. The problem in college was that for a good chunk of his early years at Oklahoma State, they couldn't get that nasty side out of him. It didn't come out on a regular basis. And so, Mike Gundy and his staff had to keep telling him, listen, you've got a whole world future here financially and professionally. If you can figure out how to dial into that on a regular basis and make a team see you as a guy that can be a starting offensive lineman for 6 to 8 years. And so there are good returns here, obviously, since they moved him to guard. The kid has done a nice job of riding the roller coaster, in his words, the roller coaster month that he's gone through and trying to seize an opportunity here before week one begins. But now as you go forward, now you've got to see the positive things consistently. You have to see that nastiness on an everyday basis. And that's going to be an ongoing challenge for both Teven and for the staff that works with them.
What type of game did Braxton Jones have, and what are the concerns about the game that he had?
Well, listen, Braxton told us very forthright last week that he's still learning how to better anchor against bull rushes, right? And he knows that in the preseason, he's put some things on film that opposing elite pass rushers are going to take note of and say, man, we can beat this kid if we do this, right? And so now he's got to go back to work, right, and get in the lab and figure out. He's talked a lot really since the spring on using his hands, right, and using his length to his advantage and being able to throw those hands quicker and do things that help slow a pass rush, if not stop it altogether. And so that's things that he has to continue to work on. Overall, Lawrence, when you go through the video of that first half of offense on Saturday, it's really, really refreshing. It's really, really different than what we've watched here for a long time. And there's so much promise in it that you say, boy, this has got to be something that this coaching staff figures out how to use going forward, because it was certainly well-timed to get that surge of production when they did.
Well, that's part of the conversation that we've been having, and we've been trying to figure out how excited to get about it. I understand it's preseason. Browns didn't have their best players on the field. They weren't game planning, but it was beyond competent for me. and competent has been the bar that we've set on this show. I liked what I saw. So what are the things that you think are stuff that they can actually take into the regular season from what they were able to do on Saturday night?
So I'll start here. When you're subject to Bears offense on game day, as I have been for the last 9 seasons, and there's a lot of times where you watch a level of incompetence, right? And then you go home and you turn on the Sunday night game, and typically it's two really good teams playing, and then you watch this and you go, what is this? This is so foreign to me to watch this brand of competence and productivity and simplicity and just being able to do basic things well to a level that keeps the opposing defense off guard. That's what Saturday's performance was that the Bears put out there. It's not an exaggeration to say that offensive performance was brilliant, because it was. We could not have asked for much more, right? From Justin Fields, from Luke Getsy, from their supporting casts on Saturday night. Now it's up to us, as you put it, to interpret this properly, right? To find logical, informed conclusions that aren't inebriated, right? Like that we don't.
That's no fun.
Yeah, right. And so it's just trying to find that measure in what we saw. I think. Look, I went back in greater detail this morning to watch that first half, and there was a level of simplicity that was so refreshing, because it was a game plan. It was play calls. It was a rhythm that created comfort. And I tweeted this, it created comfort that created confidence that leads to production, right? And because it's so foreign to us, we feel this different level of enthusiasm here in Chicago on a Monday. I think there's a lot of things from within that game plan and that approach that can carry forward. Now, as you mentioned, putting it in the proper context, the challenge is going to be much steeper every single game they play going forward than it was Saturday evening. But boy, I mean, Matt Eberflus said it well after the game. We can't judge that performance against a defense that we didn't see them play against. We can only judge it against the dynamics that they were put in, and they aced that test on Saturday. Hopefully that means a little something going into the regular season.
You want to feel really football-y, you should check out twitch.tv/Chicago670 The Score, because looking at Dan Wiederer's background right now, it's just going to make you excited. And here's the thing. You would think he's at Haugh. That's their main bedroom. people don't realize this, that actually it's sort of like you thought Matt Nagy's basement was a thing. That's the headboard. He's actually there.
Yeah. The word greatness has always been above my headboard. Right? That's always been my thing. I'm ducking my head now so that you can see it a little clearer. And, and then obviously, that's how you. It looks like the midway at Haugh Hall, but this is where the magic happens.
Seize the day, embrace the day. Damn right. I'm thinking too, when I saw the I formation and the offset I, about how Shanahan-y this offense is, that in this first game now, there's no secrets. It was one thing to see it against Cleveland's running the same stuff, and we know that this Stefanski stuff is essentially similar formations, similar actions. What gets layered over this game with all of the they know the calls, they know the cadences, they know the looks, they know the tells. What does this mean for a team deciding, look, this is what we do, we're going to trust it, or we might have to do things a little differently, or we're just playing into their hands?
Well, I think that's where Matt Nagy kind of got crossed up way too often in trying to overthink things. If you trust in what you do really well, then it really doesn't matter what the opposing defense is doing, because you have answers within your plays and within your concepts and within the trust you have in your playmakers to offset what they're doing really well. And so I think that's been a process for this group from the spring, and then obviously in the last 5 weeks, to create that trust in the system, to create the trust through struggle, right? The month of August has not always been clean for this offense, and we've documented that on the air, that there have been some days out here that have been really rough to watch. But I think what we saw on Saturday is there are some things within this offense that allow the quarterback to play fast, allow him to play without thinking, allow him to go through some high-low reads, some low-high reads, to do some things that ultimately are very basic football things that still lead to points. I go back to the first completion of the game that Justin Fields had on Saturday night, and it's a simple rollout to the right, flat pass to the fullback, Kari Blasingame, moves the chains, creates a first down. Nothing fancy about it, pretty simple. They get a gain out of it, they get a first down. They're able to go in the very next play with 8 in the box. They get a quick throw to Mooney. I called it on Twitter, the Rodgers to Devontae Adams special. It's just one of those quick game shots that picks up 5 yards, and all of a sudden you've got that momentum and that rhythm going. But I bring up that first play and that flat pass to Blasingame because it brings up two things. Number one, in Justin's own words after the game, he said that he feels progress within himself in being able to not be greedy on plays, in being willing to accept a 6-yard gain if it creates momentum and creates a first down. It's also the exact same play they ran on the touchdown pass to Kmet, with obviously a different defensive look, and Justin being able to use his rollout and his eyes to manipulate everything that happened within the defense. And so now you have two very different ways of succeeding on the same exact play, One produces a first down in the flat, one produces a over-the-top touchdown to your tight end. Now all of a sudden you see the answers within the system that ultimately get your offense unlocked on a consistent basis, which we haven't seen here since I was in 8 years old.
Dan, who played well defensively?
Well, we didn't see a lot of the main guys, right? Eddie Jackson, Roquan Smith, Jalen Johnson, all down. Robert Quinn got the Veterans Day off. I'll give you the guy who made a takeaway and then made some plays late in that game that might, at least make this front office regime think a little bit more during their roster cuts. Greg Stroman, he had a nice game out there, and they're looking for reliable depth in their secondary right now because this secondary has been extremely beat up through training camp. They don't have a lot of depth there. They've got to identify guys both at the cornerback position and the safety position that can help them, right? And can help them soon. And so that's a guy that maybe gets a longer look, at the very least, maybe a candidate for your practice squad.
Kindle Vildor made a play. I still don't know how good they think he is, but it almost doesn't matter, right?
Well, with where they are now, right? Yeah. I mean, it looks like that he is going to be your second outside starting corner with Gordon taking on that slot role and outside of Jalen Johnson. And you're okay to sigh like that because there's a lot for Kindle to prove. It was not a steady second season last year in 2021. He's got a lot to prove and a lot to show this coaching staff and this regime. Hopefully he gets help around him to minimize some of his mistakes. But I'm telling you, when you go through this roster, that's the one area that I think we haven't talked a lot about this month because we've had other things going on with the offensive line, with Roquan Smith, with the quarterback. But I think that defensive backfield depth is one that will be exposed quickly if you hit some injury woes, and they can ill afford that. And so that's something I would like to see them shore up, both with their own roster decisions and then by scouring the waiver wire this week.
As a show, we actually haven't had the chance to talk to you about the resolution of the Roquan Smith stuff. So now that we're like a week away from it all and he's back practicing and trying to get ready to play, what's your takeaway from it?
That there's still a level of fracture here, Lawrence, that has to be acknowledged, right? I think we saw, obviously, a business decision on Saturday night. Roquan, in Matt Eberflus's words, experienced tightness during pregame warmups and chose to sit out the game Saturday evening. That tightness can creep up also when you're 4-8, in the month of November. And so because it didn't resolve itself in a way that was favorable to the player now has to think at things differently. He has to see things through a different lens than the team might. And so that's something to keep an eye on as the season goes along. I also told the guys on Friday that I never see this. You never want to say, Ryan Poles 1, Roquan Smith 0, because you never want your victories to come in-house, right? You want your victories to be in other ways. And the victory for the Bears is making sure that you have a blue chip piece that can be a key part of your next championship team. And until they have Roquan solidified in that way, I don't think anybody is a winner in this situation until there's some sort of return, right, on the investment, whether you get something back ultimately or whether Roquan signs a deal long-term and then becomes part of that championship realm. So there's a long way to go before we write the final chapter on this story, and it'll be interesting just to see where Roquan keeps his mindset in the weeks ahead.
Do you think that it can be fixed?
I think anything can be fixed. Yeah, I don't sense that there's a permanence to this. I mean, if Roquan gets opportunities to play at a high level, goes out, maximizes those opportunities, makes highlight reel plays every single week, changes games, wins a few games here, and starts to show that he's worth a certain amount, I think, maybe they can find that bridge that we talked about for a month that never got built and get across that canyon somehow. But I do think it is still a canyon at this point, and so now it's up to both sides to go about their business with the understanding that there is still a canyon between them.
So now we've got 2 weeks, and other than getting healthy, scouring the waiver wire, this is a time for Matt Eberflus to refine his message. And it's his first time ever doing this, and this is at the outset of a coaching tenure, we hope. He hopes. It isn't just a season. It isn't just a game. What do you think the notes are to be hit for this team this year? And how much of it needs to be heard by next year's team and beyond?
Well, I think I said this last week because we sort of hit that lull in preseason where we were kind of out of storylines that could be advanced. Thank God the offense played the way they did Saturday, because now we've got a week to talk about that before we get into 49ers prep. But I think we had circled back heavily on the hits principle last week, right? And it went from where we all kind of, or many of us rolled our eyes in the winter and spring about the hits principle, and then started to see results from it and saw the buy-in from it and saw the results on the practice field and saw how it looked on game nights and said, okay, I see something here. And then it almost got to a point where it twisted the teeter-totter the wrong way again. And you're like, all right, now we're overdoing how valuable this acronym really is. But I bring that up because I think that Matt sees the standard being set through that set of 4 letters in a way that is unwavering. And he's going to have to make sure that the buy-in becomes sustained, right? That it can't just be a preseason buy-in for guys fighting for a roster spot and fighting for a job. It's got to be something that becomes a part of what you do every day, even when you are 4-8, right, in your first season. And guys still come out to practice understanding that there's a standard that needs to be met. And on game days, every single rep you take is going to be graded with a very high-powered microscope. And so I think Matt has to just continually harp on that this wasn't just a new coach putting in a new system, setting a new standard, that this standard has to be permanent, right? And I think that goes to Luke Getsy as well and his urgency to coach Justin Fields in that way, and understanding that, you know, we can be very demanding in a way that's constructive, and we have to be that way because we are so far off from being a football team that can not only have success but sustain it. And so I think that is something that as a first-time coach, you have to figure out the rhythms of that, and you have to figure out how to do that in a way that gets through to a full locker room.
I know that we have to control for Justin Fields being a rookie last year, but I am curious, from watching him in the preseason last year to watching him in the preseason this year, compare and contrast.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, did you watch his post-game news conference on Saturday night?
I did.
I don't know that I've ever seen Justin that upbeat and that excited and in that jovial of a spirit. Kind of talking, leaving the press box on Saturday night. Was that something that he'd been told, hey, project a little bit more, or is that just the natural feeling that comes when you throw 3 touchdown passes and a half, right? And you got a little juice in you, and you feel like you can go up there and joke around and smile and have a back and forth that doesn't feel sort of stiff and annoyed. And so I bring that up only to say that there's a level of comfort, right, that is different from a year ago. And a year ago, the dynamics here were entirely different for Justin, right? He was put into a backup role because you had a regime in place that was told that they had to win in 2021 to save their jobs. And so they knew they weren't going to be able to make a playoff berth or stay in the hunt real long if they went out with a rookie quarterback and lost 11 games. And so they went with Andy Dalton. Was it a miscalculation overall for the organizational health? Absolutely. But that miscalculation was made when they decided to keep Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy around for another year. It also changed the trajectory of Justin's development. And now here in year 2, you see the comfort and the ownership starting to come on a daily basis in a way that is infectious, right? And ultimately your quarterback has to be that hub of energy. He has to be that infectious leader. And to see Justin kind of in that mindset, and again, very well-timed performance on Saturday to make that be your closing arguments from the preseason, because now everybody here can take a little bit of a sigh of relief and relax a little bit, and then there's hope that it can carry over. But certainly I think that ownership and that comfort, Lawrence, has been evident.
Before we let you go, should we be on Robert Quinn trade watch?
I think we should be on Robert Quinn trade watch for the foreseeable future. The question is just who is feeling like that's the last piece of their championship puzzle at this point, right? And I'm not sure there are any clear answers to that. I mean, Ryan Poles' phone lines are open. He knows Robert Quinn is not going to be here the next time that they are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And so anyone that wants to call, he'll take the call. I'm just not sure there's anybody picking up that phone right now to make that call just yet. And so we'll watch that today. We'll watch that through September. We'll watch that into October and see where it all heads.
This has been a fun preseason so far, and I mean, I know it's
it may be peaking. The Bears
right,
2022 may be peaking.
Like there's that possibility, right? That and again, like thankfully that closing argument was what it was on Saturday, because now it just at least walls off the pessimism and the anxiety for at least 2 more weeks.